They say the streets of Los Angeles don't feel anything. They say the city is too loud, too bright, too hungry for the next big thing to stop and notice something small. People walk faster here. They look past you. They look through you. And on a cold December night in 2002, on the corner of Cahuenga Boulevard and Hollywood Walk of Fame, most of the world was doing exactly that. Passing by. Not stopping. Not listening. But something happened that night that nobody planned. Something that didn't make the front page of any newspaper. Something that was never turned into a headline. In fact, only a handful of people even knew it occurred. Until now. A little girl was singing on that sidewalk. Her voice was raw and unsteady, carried by the wind through the cold night air. Most people walked right past her without a second glance. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. But one man stopped. He didn't stop because he was supposed to. He didn't stop because cameras were rolling or because anyone was watching. He stopped because something inside that voice reached through all the noise of the city and grabbed him by the chest and simply would not let go. That man's name was Tom Cruise. And what happened next, the conversation he had, the promise he made, and what that one moment of human kindness set into motion, is a story that will stay with you long after this video is over. But before we get there, you need to understand who this little girl was. Because her story is not just about the night Tom Cruise heard her singing. It's about what it means to be truly seen by another human being when the whole world has decided you are invisible. Stay with me. This one matters. And before we go any further, drop a comment below and tell us, where in the world are you watching this right now? We love hearing from every corner of the globe. And if this kind of story moves you, hit that subscribe button, because we tell these stories every single week. Her name was Maya. She was 9 years old, though she carried herself like someone twice that age. Hardship has a way of doing that to a child. It takes something soft and turns it into something that knows how to survive. Maya had no home. She had no parents that anyone knew of. She had no warm bed waiting for her, no kitchen with a light on, no one who saved her a seat at the table. She had been in and out of the foster system since she was 4 years old, bounced from house to house like something no one quite knew what to do with. 3 months before that December night, she had slipped through a crack in the system entirely. She was just gone. A little girl lost in a city of 4 million people, and not one of them knew she was missing. What Maya did have was a voice. A voice that had absolutely no business coming out of a body that small and that worn down. It was the kind of voice that stops you mid-sentence. Rich and clear and aching, like it had already lived 100 years inside a 9-year-old frame. On that cold December night, she stood on that sidewalk wrapped in an oversized gray hoodie that dragged along the ground, a pair of beat-up sneakers with the right sole held together by a rubber band, and no jacket despite the temperature being just above 40 degrees. In front of her sat a paper coffee cup with a few crumpled dollar bills and some loose change. And she was singing. The song was "You've Lost That Loving Feeling," the same anthem that had roared through a movie theater a decade earlier in Top Gun. Maya didn't know that. She had no idea what Top Gun was. She had heard the song playing through the open window of a diner 3 weeks earlier, and it had carved itself into her memory and never left. She sang it every night. It was the only thing in the world that felt entirely hers. She had no idea that 2 blocks away, Tom Cruise was sitting in the back of a car. And that everything was about to change. To understand why that moment meant what it did to Tom Cruise, you need to understand where he was in his life in December of 2002. On the outside, he was untouchable. He was the biggest movie star on the planet. Mission Impossible had redefined action cinema. Jerry Maguire had shown the world he could crack open and be vulnerable on screen. Minority Report had just wrapped. Vanity Fair called him the last true movie star. Forbes said he was one of the most powerful people in Hollywood. By every measure the world uses to keep score, Tom Cruise was winning. But he was 40 years old. And something had shifted. The divorce from Nicole Kidman had finalized the year before. It had been quiet and brutal in the way that only private pain can be. The tabloids had made it a circus. But behind all of that noise, there was a man who was sitting with a question he didn't quite know how to answer. Who are you when no one is watching? Not the character. Not the franchise. Not the smile on the poster. Who are you, actually? That night, He had come from a private dinner in West Hollywood with his producing partner. He had been in meetings all week. Press. Schedules. The relentless machinery of being Tom Cruise. And somewhere in all of that motion, he had started to feel something he didn't have a word for. Not sadness exactly. Not loneliness in the way most people mean it. More like distance. Like he was standing on one side of a thick pane of glass, watching his own life happen to someone else. His driver that night was a man named Gerald, who had driven for Tom on and off for years. Gerald was the kind of man who knew when to talk and when to be quiet. That night, he was quiet. They were cutting through Hollywood on their way back to the hotel, avoiding the 101. The city was lit up outside the window. Tom wasn't watching it. He was somewhere else entirely in his mind when Gerald slowed the car. "Mr. Cruise," Gerald said. Low and careful. "You hear that?" Tom didn't look up at first. "Hear what, Gerald?" "Just listen." Tom went still. And then, cutting right through the noise of the city, through the traffic and the distant music from a bar on the corner, he heard it. A voice. Small. Unguarded. Singing like no one was listening. He sat up straight. "Pull over," he said. "Right now." Now, before we go any further, tell us in the comments, are you the kind of person who stops, or do you keep walking? And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that button. You do not want to miss what happens next. Tom Cruise was out of that car before Gerald had fully stopped it. He walked quickly at first, then slower as the voice got clearer. He turned the corner onto Cahuenga Boulevard and stopped completely. She was standing under a street light that buzzed and flickered like it was fighting to stay on. She was so small that for a moment Tom thought she might be younger than she was. The gray hoodie swallowed her whole. The paper cup on the ground in front of her held maybe $3. And her eyes were closed, her chin tilted up slightly, her hands flat against her sides, and she was singing. Singing "You've Lost That Loving Feeling," like it was the last song left in the world. Her voice cracked on some of the higher notes. She didn't have the range to nail every moment. But that wasn't what stopped Tom Cruise in his tracks. What stopped him was the honesty in it. There was no performance there. No awareness of an audience. She was singing because the song was the only shelter she had that night. Every single word sounded like she had lived it. Tom stood about 15 feet away and didn't move. People walked past her on both sides. A man in a suit talking on a cell phone. Two women laughing about something. A teenager with headphones on who glanced at her for half a second and kept walking. Nobody stopped. Nobody really looked at her. Tom looked at nothing else. She finished the song. Her voice faded on the last note and the street seemed quieter for a moment. She opened her eyes, looked down at the paper cup, and the expression on her face, that quiet, private disappointment of someone counting $3 and knowing it isn't enough, was the kind of thing that gets into your chest and doesn't come back out. Tom walked toward her slowly. He made sure his footsteps were audible. He didn't want to frighten her. "Hey," he said gently. Maya looked up. Her eyes were enormous. Dark and exhausted and careful, in the way that children who have learned to be careful always are. She took one small step back. "That was beautiful," Tom said. "That song. The way you just sang it." She didn't say anything. She watched him. Tom crouched down so he was at her eye level. Right there on the sidewalk in his jacket and his dress shoes. He didn't think about it. He just did it. "Where'd you learn to sing like that?" he asked. Maya's shoulders dropped a fraction. "I just heard it somewhere," she said quietly. "I remembered it." "Do you know what movie that song is in?" She shook her head. "It's in a movie called Top Gun." He paused. "I'm actually in that movie." Maya studied him. Really studied him, the way kids do when they are trying to decide something important. "Are you an actor?" "I am." "Are you famous?" Tom almost smiled. "Some people think so." "I don't really watch movies," she said. And there was no apology in it. Just a fact. Something about that, the complete absence of recognition, the total indifference to who he was, landed on Tom Cruise like a gift he hadn't known he needed. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya." "Maya. That's a really good name." "I'm Tom." He reached out his hand. She shook it. Formal and careful, like she'd been taught once and hadn't forgotten. Are you out here alone, Maya? A pause. Then, yes. Where's your family? Her face changed. Just slightly. The careful look got more careful. I don't have one. Tom was quiet for a moment. He didn't rush past it. He let it sit there, because it deserved to. How long have you been out here tonight? Since it got dark. He reached into his jacket. Took out his wallet. Removed every bill that was in it and held it out to her. She stared at it. That's too much, she said. No, it isn't. I didn't do anything. You sang, Tom said. And you sang it better than anyone I've heard in a long time. That's worth something. That's worth a lot, actually. Maya slowly reached out and took the money. Her hands were shaking slightly from the cold. Tom stood up. He looked at Gerald, who had pulled the car to the curb half a block down and was watching quietly. Then he looked back at Maya. I'm not going to walk away and leave you out here, he said. I want to help you. Not because I have to. Because I want to. Can I do that? Maya looked at him for a long time. Long enough that Tom didn't rush her. Long enough to feel like a real decision. Okay, she said finally. Yes. Tom took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It covered her down to her knees. He walked her to the car. Gerald didn't say a word. He simply opened the door. They drove to a restaurant Tom knew on Melrose. Warm and quiet and away from everything. Maya ate a cheeseburger and fries and a chocolate milkshake and half a slice of pie. She ate steadily and without embarrassment, the way someone eats when they've been hungry long enough that shame stops being part of it. Tom drank coffee and watched her and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Not the adrenaline of a stunt. Not the rush of a standing ovation. Something quieter than all of that. Something that felt, more than anything else, like being exactly where he was supposed to be. He made 2 phone calls from the back of the restaurant. The second one was to a woman named Donna, who ran a licensed children's residence in Culver City that Tom had quietly supported for 3 years. He explained the situation. Donna said she would come herself. When Tom came back to the table, Maya was finishing the last of her milkshake. She looked up at him. For the first time that night, she smiled. Small and a little uncertain, but real. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet, Tom said, sitting back down across from her. I've got a plan. And I want to tell you about it. She leaned forward slightly and listened. Tom Cruise kept every single promise he made that night. Every one. Over the next several months, he arranged for Maya to be enrolled in a stable licensed children's home in Culver City, the one Donna ran. He covered the cost personally, without announcement, without a press release, without a single photograph. He arranged for her to be enrolled in a good school nearby. He sent her a box of books and a new pair of sneakers within the first week. He visited her twice in the first month, then once a month after that. He called on her birthday. He showed up. And Maya began to change. Not overnight. Not in the clean, dramatic way that happens in movies. It happened the way real healing happens, slowly and unevenly, with setbacks and hard days folded in between the good ones. But it happened. The scared, watchful girl who had counted $3 in a paper cup on a cold Hollywood sidewalk started to become something else. She started sleeping through the night. She started making friends. She started laughing at things. She started singing not just because the nights were cold and she needed something to hold on to, but because she wanted to. About 8 months after that December night, Tom was in Los Angeles between productions. He called Donna and asked if Maya could come visit the studio where he was doing some production work. Maya was 10 by then. Taller, healthier, eyes wide open in a way they hadn't been before. She walked into that building and looked around at the lights and the equipment and the controlled, contained world of it, and she was absolutely transfixed. Tom introduced her to the sound engineer, a veteran named Ray who had worked on more recordings than either of them could count. Ray, Tom said, this young lady has a voice you need to hear. Ray set up a microphone. Just like that. Maya stood in front of it and went very still. And then she sang. She sang, "You've Lost That Loving Feeling" again, the same song from the sidewalk, but this time her voice was stronger. more settled. Like she had finally found solid ground underneath it. Nobody in that booth made a sound until she finished. Ray looked at Tom. Tom looked at Ray. Neither of them needed to say anything. Tom walked Maya out of the booth afterward and knelt down beside her, just like he had that first night on the sidewalk. "I need you to understand something," he said. "That voice of yours is not an accident. It is not luck. It is the realest thing about you. And no matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, don't you ever let anyone talk you out of using it." Maya looked at him. "Even when it's hard?" "Especially then," Tom said. She nodded slowly. She believed him. "And here's the part that stays with you, that recording Ray made that afternoon in the studio?" Tom had it mixed and pressed onto a single disc. He gave it to Maya in a small case with her name written on it in marker. "This is proof," he told her. "Proof that you were here. That you mattered. That your voice was real." She kept that disc in a safe place for the rest of her life. Before we go to the final chapter of Maya's story, comment below and tell us, has a stranger ever done something kind for you that you never forgot? We read every single comment. And if this story is hitting home, please share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Maya grew up. She never became famous. She never stood on a stage at a major awards show or had her name on a marquee. She didn't need any of that. What she became was something quieter and more lasting. She became a music teacher. She worked in a public school in South Los Angeles for over 2 decades, teaching kids who reminded her of herself, kids who were running out of time, running low on hope, carrying voices that the world hadn't gotten around to noticing yet. She built a program from nothing. She fought for funding year after year. She stayed late. She showed up on weekends. She gave those children what had once been given to her, the simple, radical act of being truly seen. She kept the disc Tom had given her in a small wooden box on her desk. And sometimes, on the hard days, the days when the funding fell through or a student broke her heart, she would open that box, hold the disc in her hands, and remember the night a stranger crouched down on a cold sidewalk and told her that her voice mattered. She thought about Tom Cruise, not the movie star. Not the franchise. Not the man on the poster. She thought about the man who had gotten out of a car on a cold December night, walked around a corner, crouched down to the eye level of a 9-year-old girl with $3 in a paper cup, and decided that she was worth his time. The world knows Tom Cruise for impossible missions and rooftop sprints and a smile that has lit up screens across 6 decades. Maya knows him for something else entirely. She knows him as the man who stopped when everyone else kept walking. That is who he really is. And maybe that is the real measure of a person. Not the missions they complete. Not the records they break. Not the roles they play or the awards on the shelf. But this, the willingness to stop. On a cold night. On a dark corner. When no one is watching and there is nothing to gain. When the world is rushing past and every logical instinct says keep moving. The willingness to hear something small and say, that matters. So the next time you watch Tom Cruise run across a screen, and he will keep running, because that is what he does, don't just see the action. Don't just see the star. See the man who once pulled over on Cahuenga Boulevard and walked around a corner because a little girl's voice cut through everything else and asked to be heard. And remember Maya. Remember what it felt like to be invisible. Remember what it would mean to have someone choose, out of nothing but their own humanity, to see you. Because that choice is available to every single one of us. Every day. In every city. On every corner where someone is singing into the cold and hoping, just hoping, that somebody will stop. Be the person who stops. That is what this story is really asking you to do. Tom Cruise. Still running. Still surprising us. Still, when it counts the most, stopping. If this story moved you, share it with one person tonight. Leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. And subscribe, because every week, we find another story that reminds us what human beings are actually capable of. Rest in that, for a moment. You've earned it.